Hello there, thank you for watching. My name is Mrs. Campbell and I work at West Acton Primary School, as well as teaching Year 6 and being the Year 6 group leader. I'm also part of the English team, working with other members of staff, trying to help the children develop their English skills, particularly in reading across the school. So thank you for watching today. I just wanted to share some information with you about what we do at the school to help your child with reading, and some suggestions of what you could also do at home to help your child to make even more progress in their reading. So following on from Miss Kondo's video on phonics and reading in November, she made a video quite like this where she had slides and she explained that as a school we follow the little wandle approach to phonics teaching and reading. Phonics is a key strategy to reading in everything that we do. So as children are growing up through the school from very early years through Key Stage 1, we teach phonics as a first approach to reading, and as they get used to reading bigger words, we teach them how to chunk up words. So that's using syllables to read longer words, looking for smaller words in bigger words, until they get to the point where children can recognize words off by sight. They don't need to sound out everything. They don't need to break things up unless they come across new words. And even as adults, we come across new words, don't we, sometimes, that we need to sound out or chunk up. So still, whatever I share with you today, it just shows how we build on from the reading fluency of being able to decode and read words. And then we'll move on to how we teach reading comprehension at West Acton Primary School. So in terms of comprehension in years 2 to 6, we build on the comprehension skills so that basically children have a deeper understanding of what they read. As well as phonics lessons in year 2 also have a separate English lesson, and they also have a separate reading lesson as well set out throughout the week. Years 3, 4, 5 and 6, so in all of Key Stage 2, children also have regular reading lessons about 4 to 5 times a week, depending on their timetable. And those reading lessons are in addition to the English lessons that they have. So we very specifically teach the reading skills. We still focus on developing that fluency, reading with confidence, sounding out, chunking up, and increasing that speed and stamina that children can keep going and persevere with reading more appropriately challenging books. We've also focused on vocabulary building and make sure children have a wide vocabulary. If they can read those words and hear those words, they're more likely to use those words in their spoken and their written language. However, the purpose of the reading lessons that we do is to develop the children's comprehension skills. That means their deeper understanding of what they are reading. Sometimes we can assume that a child can read and this text is appropriate for them. However, reading the words is not enough. They need to be able to understand what they are reading. This is so important, and reading is a core skill that they would use across the curriculum. So if children have a really good understanding of reading skills or how to read and also understand what they're reading, they apply it in everything that they do. They're applying their science lessons, their history lessons, their geography lessons, even in their maths lessons. If you think about children have to be able to read maths word problems and be able to understand what the problem is asking for them to do before they can use their mathematical skills, reading is key in all aspects of learning. So what are the reading lessons like that I'm talking about at West Acton from years 2 to 6? So in these specific year groups, children have been learning the reading skills a new way this academic year. They've always been learning them. However, we've trialled out a new way this year and it's been very successful so far. We trialled it out in year 6 the previous year and it worked very well. And so we've set it out throughout the rest of the school. They've always learnt these specific skills at West Acton, but through the autumn term and now through the spring term, we've been learning those specific skills in very small step-by-step approach in order to help pupils store this learning into their long-term memory so they can understand what they are reading with increasing independence and more confidence. We all want our children to be confident, independent, fluent readers who love reading and they're fulfilling their learning to their highest potential. So what are these reading skills very specifically? Well, in the Key Stage 2 curriculum and much of the Key Stage 1 curriculum, the main reading skills that children develop at primary school are retrieval, and I'll explain all of these. Retrieval, summarizing in Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 1, it's sequencing, clarifying the meaning of unfamiliar vocabulary, so new words, working out what new words mean, inference, prediction, and justifying. So all these skills are relevant throughout Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, just as summarizing and sequencing are relevant to one key stage and then the other. Sequencing in Key Stage 1, summarizing in Key Stage 2, but they are linked. So what do they mean? So your child has learned how to retrieve. They would have learned this already. However, as we've been teaching it the new way this academic year at West Acton Primary School, the children have been learning in very small steps on how to retrieve. So this is the poster that children are used to seeing in school. To retrieve, it means to find information directly from the text. If you follow the bullet points, you can see the children would have been taught how to identify keywords from a question. Then they learn how to skim and how to scan to find which part of the text should they find the answer. That's the skimming. And then specifically, which words are they going to look for? That's the scanning. And then they try to pick out the answer directly from the text in a concise manner. And they've learned that those are the steps that are required. Find the keywords, skim, scan, and be concise when you pick out the answer from a text. That's retrieval. So they would have learned retrieval before. However, we've used this method in just breaking down the learning of each reading skill into very small steps. And the children practice very small steps learning throughout their reading lessons throughout the weeks. The idea is that they become more confident and independent, and they can remember, this is how I retrieve, this is what I would do. Children also get used to seeing different types of retrieval question and recognizing that when they have a set of questions, a set of comprehension questions, they can recognize and know, okay, that's retrieval. I know that. I can tell by the way the question is written. Those are the types of retrieval questions I've already looked at. And from their long-term memory, they will remember, oh yeah, I have to pick out keywords. So they might have used a highlighter to highlight keywords in the question and the text. They might have just used their pen or pencil to underline keywords in the question and the text. They skim over to the correct part of the text where they're going to find the answer. They scan, that means they zoom in and look for specifically the keywords from the question. They read around it to find the answer, and then they pick it out and write it. So they've been learned very specifically how to do those small steps of learning so they can do it independently and they can be successful, and they know how to approach different types of questions. Another reading skill that children have been learning is to summarize. And this picture is one of my favorites. It helps children to know that it's to make a long story short. So again, you'd identify the keywords. Keywords are very important. So we say to the children, keywords, just like in retrieval, are often to do with the 5 W's. So who, what, where, when, and sometimes why. So when your children read a paragraph or they read a page in the younger years, you might say, well, who's the main character in the story? What are they doing? Where is this story set? When is this happening? Why did they do that? If your child can answer those main points of the question, it shows they've understood the main points of the text. They have good comprehension. If sometimes you listen to a child read and they can read it fluently, you think, great, you're a really good reader. But then you ask them a simple question like, who is the character? And they might say it was a boy. Yes, but who? Who is the boy? Oh, it doesn't say on this page. Yes, but it said on a page before. You've been reading many pages. So what was the name? They need to have understood the main points and retain them in their memory to be able to continue the comprehension as they go along. So ask your child the 5 W's. Once they've selected the 5 W's, they pick out the main important bits, for example, the who, what, where, when, why. They could even list these down. So if they can't retain all this information, they could even, often in class, we've got the children to write the keyword who and then write down the name of the character in the paragraph and where, and they write down where it's set and when it's set, and they make notes. Then they've got all these keywords telling them who the character is, what they did, where they did it, when and why. And then they put those in a sentence. So this is that bit here where it's saying orally, mentally link all those keywords together to make a summary, to make a long story short. Sometimes we say to the children, you won't always have all the W's. It won't always tell you where the story is set in that paragraph because it's the same as the last paragraph or the last page. Or sometimes it might not tell you why the character did that. That might be coming later. So you might not always be able to pick out the 5 W's. But to understand what you're reading as you go along, children should always be able to tell you mainly who, what, where, when, or why, and they can note these keywords down to help them put them into a sentence, and that is their summarizing skill. The other reading skill your child would have been practicing is clarifying. So ask them, what does clarifying mean? They should be able to say it means when you explain the meaning of a new word and you're not sure what it means. Often when we first started teaching the reading skill, children will say, well, you just check in the dictionary when you don't know what a word means, or you ask a parent, or you ask a teacher, or you can Google it. You can Google everything, right? However, you will not always have access to a parent, a dictionary, Google, as you are reading in your your childhood and your adult life, you need to be able to have the clarifying skills so that you can continue reading without having to stop and check something on your phone or check a dictionary or check to ask someone. To be independent and to learn new vocabulary, there are certain strategies we can use to work out what words mean. And here they are. So your child would have been learning, one thing you can do is read around the word. So that means read the rest of the sentence, read the sentence after, read the sentence before, read around it, see in context what makes sense around that word to help you understand the meaning. Don't read the word by itself, read around it. Another strategy they would have used is relating the new word to their spellings, looking for root words, prefixes, suffixes. Sometimes if a word is longer, but you realize there's a smaller root word within it, that helps you understand the meaning of it. And therefore you can use your knowledge of spellings to help you clarify the meaning. You can apply your knowledge of synonyms. This is very useful strategy to use. That when you've got a sentence, there's a word you're not sure what it means, read the whole sentence, try to replace it with another synonym. I'm acting out, parents, because when we teach the children, often actions help the children to remember these things. So we replace the word with another synonym, another word which makes sense in the sentence, and that's very useful to work out what the word means. Use a context of the wider story. For example, I was reading a story with my class and it involved the word demolition or destruction and rubble. And it was all to do with a story that was set during World War II. And they made sense of it. The children had learned about World War II and humanities, and they understood, they could clarify the meaning of the words, thinking of, oh, I know this, I know that you'd have a war, I knew you'd have soldiers, I know that this is what this means. So the wider context of what else is happening in the story would help the children to make sense of particular words they don't know. And sometimes just saying to the children, use your own experiences, try to think about, have you heard that word before? Have you heard a word like that before? Does it make sense? Another strategy we use sometimes is to use knowledge of the word class, especially as we go up to the higher years within the school. We ask the children, can you recognize what type of word it is? So in terms of word class, for example, if the word ends in ed that you're trying to clarify, often that's past tense verb. If the word ends in ing, often that's a verb in the present tense. If the word ends in ly, often, but not always, that's an adverb. If a word ends in ous, like delicious, suspicious, cautious, then often it's an adjective. So children look for spelling patterns and word class to help them recognize what type of word it is as well. So these are the strategies they would have learned to use. Read around the word, try to look at the word class, what type of word is it, look for root words, prefixes and suffixes, replacing it with a synonym and thinking, have you heard this before? Does it remind you of anything else before? What would make sense in the context of what you're reading? These are the strategies we would ask children to use when they read to you at home. Another reading skill we've been learning, your child would have been learning, is to make inferences about a character, how they are feeling. So again, this is to do with fiction stories, to infer how a character is feeling, what they might be thinking, and why they did that. So to do that, it's a key skill, it's one of the higher level thinking skills, and the one that we really need to develop as we grow up into adult life as well. We look at people's facial expressions to determine how they might be feeling, or we might look at someone's body language to see how they're acting, to infer how they must be feeling or what they might be thinking. So sometimes when you're watching TV shows together or movies, or you see people in real life, you might even have that conversation with your child and say, oh, how's so-and-so feeling right now? How do you know? And they might say, well, I can tell they're cross because they're standing very stiff with their fists are clenched. And then I can think from their body language that they're looking very cross. Or you might be reading a book together at bedtime and it says that a character is shaking. You might say, well, why do you think the character is shaking? They might say, your child might say, well, maybe because they were cold. Yes, maybe because they were scared, maybe because they were nervous. Okay, well, let's look at the context. What else has happened in the story? Is it a cold place? Are there any clues to suggest that it's cold? Yes, no, then it's not to do with being cold. What about nervous and feeling scared? Has anything happened that would make you feel nervous or you feel scared if you think about what's happened in this story to this character? And it's using those social skills of being aware of how other people might feel as well. So when we infer how a character is feeling and how they are thinking and why they might have acted a certain way, we look at as opposed to facial expressions, their body language, because they're setting the context, what else has happened in text, and using your own experiences to help make a link between what's happening to the character, how you might feel, and then helping to infer how they might be feeling. Linked to inference is prediction. Prediction is essentially inference but to do with the future, so we use the same steps for learning. Predict what do you think will happen in the text in the future. Again, this is mainly repetition. So reverse the evidence in the text. You use your previous knowledge and experiences, just like you would in inference. Just like when you think, well, I think this person is shaking because I know when this has happened to me, I would have felt like that as well. So that's your own previous knowledge and experience. But then you use your inferences to think what would happen in the future. So the main message of prediction is we encourage children to make predictions of what they think will happen next in the story, but based on real evidence, not a random guess, not a random. Sometimes children, like if you show them the front cover of a book, I've done this in my class, and they see light shining. And sometimes the prediction of the front cover has just been, I think this epic story is set in space because the light shining down. I think it's from an alien ship. So okay, fine. Now let's explore the front cover a bit more. We had more of a discussion as a class. Let's read the blurb. Let's read the title. Let's read the that evidence. Do you still think it's an alien ship? Do you still think it's set in space? Was there any other clues besides the fact that there's a light to make you predict that? That's what will happen in the story. Is to do base. Or now have you got more evidence to make a different prediction? And most children in my class are able to say, well, yes, now I know this, this, and this. I've got more evidence. Now I can actually make a prediction. Now I've changed my mind. Now I think this will happen in the book. And that's okay. The whole point of a prediction is as you collect more evidence, you, as it says in post here, you will review your prediction. As you get more evidence, you think what's most likely now that I know this, and you make your prediction from that point in the text. So when you're reading your child at home after showing the front cover and predicting, well, what can we see? What evidence is there in the illustration on the front cover? What do you think this book is about? What do you think will happen? Now let's read the blurb. Has that changed your mind? Do you still predict that will happen? Or now has your prediction changed at all? And letting them know it's okay to change your prediction because you've collected more evidence. Linked to both inference and prediction is the last main reading skill that your child will learn, justifying. Justifying is not a reading skill necessarily on its own. Like I said, it is linked to inference and justifying. It basically means to explain and prove why you think what you do. So when someone's inferred how a character is feeling, why do you think they feel like that? If you infer what character is thinking, why do you think they're thinking that? What has happened in the text to make you think that? If you're going to make a prediction, and it can't just be random, what is your evidence? What's happened so far to make you think that that's what will happen next? So justify, prove, and give evidence to your answer. This is another quite higher level reading skill, like inference and justifying. They go together hand in hand, and these are the higher level thinking skills you want our children to achieve as they work their way through school. And to develop their deeper understanding of what they read. So we ask children to identify the evidence in the text which supports their opinion. We encourage children to also use specific quotes from the text. So this is a specific part in the story which makes me think that this character is nervous, and they need to perhaps add relevant detail. They can explain it. This is a part of the text. This is why I think this is helping me to justify the character's feelings and look at the context or what else has happened in the wider example of the text. So when children are collecting evidence to prove and explain why they infer something or why they predict something, it might not just be for one part of the text. Often it can be from various parts of the text. They've collected evidence to show, well, this happened here and this happened here. And before that happened, and those are the reasons why I predict this will happen. So as you get older, it's sometimes to be greater depth readers and know that you sometimes have to look at different parts of the text to prove your point. And in terms of working through tests, as the children do in each term, sometimes the mark scheme asks the children to give more detail in their answers by doing something we call P. P for making your point, E is for evidence, and another E for P. So P-E-E. P makes your point, so I think that the character's being nervous. E is for evidence. Can you explain why you think that? Can you find a part in the text that helps you think that? And the other E is, can you explain in more detail now, what does that show you? Why does that help you back up your point? So we encourage the children to be very specific, go to the text, find the evidence, back up your opinion, your thought, or inference, or prediction. So through that, I tried to explain how you might use those reading skills, and we've been teaching the reading skills at school, but also now to talk a bit more about how you can help your child at home with it. So just to recap, all children should be reading at home 5 times a week at least, and they have lovely reading records. Listen and read please daily, especially younger children. But as they get older, like in Key Stage 2, and as they go up, you may reduce the amount of times that you listen to them read. For example, by years 5 and 6, you might just listen to your child read once a week, but you still need to listen to your child read to check how they are reading, and also to check their fluency and to check their comprehension and support them with that. So in our reading lessons, we teach the children how to read, and when they're reading independently, they're developing these reading skills. We don't have sessions where an adult gets to list every single child read. We do try to listen to them read throughout the curriculum, read from the board, read the text aloud, read out the works. Children have opportunities to read. And that personalised time at home reading with your child is really important to help them develop their reading confidence. So all children have this lesson, they have we match the read at home book. It has a little book and colour at the side often to show which level book that they have for their and this means their reading level. So they practice reading book every day, 5 days a week at least at home. The idea is they should progress and be ready to move on to the next reading level. Children should be reading this at least 5 times a week and writing comments in there, written their lovely new reading records that we got this year. And some younger children may need support in filling in their reading record for them or with them. But as the children go through Key Stage 2, they should be able to record more comments themselves. How else to support your child with reading? So if English is not the first language, you can still support your child with reading by helping them to make sure they're still reading for 20 minutes a day, at least 5 times a week. So even just making sure, asking them, we've got the routine, when you come home and have a snack and maybe you've got change, do 20 minutes of reading, please. Some parents have said to me that their child's quite tired by the time they do reading because it's just before they go to bed, and sometimes that might be a reason why they haven't done so much reading, or they're a bit too tired to concentrate. And just to explain, these are 2 different things. When we ask children to read for 20 minutes at home and to write in their reading record, to write comments like they may retrieve, these are the main points that I found out about my story, or they summarise, this is summary what happened on this page or this chapter, or they write down an inference, I infer that the character is reading this, but in their reading record they write a comment such as a prediction, I predict this will happen because. Using the reading skills that they've learned, they should be reading by themselves or with you if they're very young, and then writing their comments in their reading record. That's their homework. That shouldn't be done just before they go to bed. That's homework, so that should be done at some point as a family. You decide when, but earlier on in the afternoon, the evening after school. The bit before going to bed, that's different. That's a reading pleasure. There they have a library book from school, they may have books from home, maybe books that you shared with them and you may read to them at home as well. That's going to bedtime, reading a book for pleasure or relaxation, which is lovely. That's a different time for reading. That's not the homework time. So just to clarify that, because I know some children and parents were unsure about that. So again, if English is not your first language, you still listen to read, still make sure that for at least 20 minutes or whatever is applicable within your family routine, that they're reading for 20 minutes when they get home, and they're recording it in their reading record. If they're in Key Stage 1, you'd be writing their comments for them. You can ask them questions about what they've read in your home language. You don't have to ask them questions in English, and you don't even have to have understood the text, but still ask them, what's that text about? Who's in the story? exactly? Where is it? What happened? When? Can you make the long story short? Can you clarify a new word? Can you replace it with a synonym? Can you tell me what you think is going to happen next? Why? Can you justify why you think it's going to happen next? So all these questions you can still ask, but it would just be your home language, and children would be developing their own language, their English language, both, which is great for their growth and still develops their reading skills. So just to recap, if you're going to ask them retrieval questions when you listen to them read, here are some questions. You can ask them who, what, where, when, or what is so-and-so doing. Here's a reminder of the steps of learning the children have had for retrieval. If you're asking your child to summarize, you could use the 5 W's. You could say, tell me the main points from this paragraph, or from this age, or from this chapter, or even the whole story if it's a very short story. You could say, tell me the 5 W's, who, what, where, when, why. Can you tell me what happened? And checking with the children that they do understand what's happened. And to make that long story short, another way it says, can you tell me in the story or in the chapter what's happened at the beginning and the middle and the end? That helps to make the long story short. Can you summarize what's happened in 3 sentences only? Again, that can be in your home language or in English. As long as we're asking the children questions, check they understand what they read. Sometimes children are reading, but they're not being asked questions to check their comprehension, to develop their comprehension, and their reading level will stay the same. They'll just read the same books and get bored of the same books. Their reading level's the same. They need to be asked questions. To clarify, what could you ask your child if you want them to develop their clarifying skills, learning new words? You could say to them, do you know what that word means? Sometimes children will just read and they won't stop and they won't know what it means. But you look out, you have a look, can you tell me what that word means? Can you explain what that means in your own words? And if they can't, you can say, well, let's look at clarifying first, which we've got here on the slide. Which one of these strategies would you find useful? Which one should you use? Try to read about the word. Remember, that means read a bit before and a bit after. Does that help you work out what the word means? Okay, let's try to get a word with a synonym. Another word which has a synonym, and would it make sense? Does that help you clarify the meaning? Does the word have a root word? For example, the word reconsideration. It's quite a long word, but the root word is consider. It's got a prefix and suffix. The root word is consider. What reconsideration means. Think of your spelling words when you have words beginning with read before. Do you remember what class words? Is it ends in ed? Is it past tense perfect? It ends in l1, is it an adverb, so on. Does this help you work out the meaning of the new word? So to pick out words which you think the child may or may not be able to clarify, and if they can pick out words and together ask some questions, do it very using just find skills together. You might say, how might the character feel? That's the inference. How do you know that they feel like that? And your child may explain to you because they did this because they said that. What might the character be thinking then? What makes you think that? So asking the child to justify and explain why they think that. Why does this to show that? To back up your point. So that's to justify working hand in hand to the inference. Why do you think? What do you feel if you were in that situation? So there's that emphasizing the social and emotional intelligence, which is the life skill for all of us, but also developing through reading and have a deep understanding in reading, and therefore deep enjoyment for reading as well, and encourage children to want to read more because they really understood the character's point of view. They might be able to relate to a character more if they can develop their inference skills, and then they'll want to read more. Why did the character do this? Explain their motive. So in school we talked about that. There's a reason why someone did something, trying to use that same language so they can learn at school, so they can practice it at home. Prediction also works hand in hand. Justifying, you might ask your child, what do you think will happen next? Where does it support the prediction? Then we have the prediction. Should prediction change? Why? These are questions which you would alter and you would change in a way that suits the age of your child. These are just general suggestions that will definitely help your child develop their reading comprehension, their understanding of what they read as they go from year 2 to year 6. So as we come to the end, I've gone through most of the reading skills and the main points I wanted to share with you. My main message is just the importance of reading is so very high. With much scientific research, one of the expected predictors of life success, one way of measuring how successful people will be as they get older, is one reading ability in primary school. There's a lot of scientific research which looks at the reading habits of 10-year-old, for example, 10-year-old in primary school, and indicates how much they read for pleasure because they want to and they enjoy reading and they understand what they read. If you can measure that, that's an indicator of how successful children will be when they're adults. And they've actually measured that. Education scientists have done a lot of research to find that there's a connection between that. Because by the time they're finishing primary school, if they have got these reading skills, they can understand so much, not just in reading English lessons, but across the curriculum. In the wider world, they can look online, they can look at magazines, they can read newspapers, and they want to write, they want to read, they want to find information, understand what they read. The world makes so much more sense, so they will value education and develop in whichever fields they go into as they get older. But reading really is the core skill, which is why I would say reading is homework that must be done every day, at least 5 days a week. So including new research across many countries, it shows that the best predictor of future education, to be successful in higher education and life success, is a child's reading ability. And being an engaged reader, wanting to read. So create habits at home where your child wants to read to you in a routine which works for you as a busy parent and works for your child when they're tired after school. It's really important to try to get those reading habits going. So those are the main points I wanted to share with you about reading. Thank you for your time. Please do talk to your child about the reading skills that they've been learning. If there are any other questions that you have, perhaps speak to your class teacher as a first point. Beyond that, if you wanted to contact the school to find out more, please feel free to do so. But the main message is please listen to your child read, ensure that they're reading, ask some questions about reading. So as we work together hand in hand to support our children to have the love for reading and understand what they're reading, then they will be very successful in whatever they choose to do in life. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.